like that music. That's very springtime-ish, right? Yeah. Well, what a season of life it has been for us. We have all lived in a pandemic, and we're still in it. Can you believe that? I mean, it didn't really sink in, but this is going to be in history books. 100 years from now, if the world still is going on, they're going to look back and remember 2020 and 2021. We have been living through racial unrest and injustices. We've been living through political unrest. We've been living through a lot. Our way of life has been challenged. Our way of seeing and thinking has been challenged. It's been uncomfortable and unsettling. It has been unnerving and at times overwhelming. We have wrestled with emotions that range from anger about restrictions, anger about change and all the change around us. Sometimes we're just angry if somebody looks at us weird, ranging from anger to sadness. Sadness because of all the change. Sadness because of not being able to connect with each other and missing out on being with one another. Sadness because of the countless lives that have been taken by a virus, among other things. This has been an incredibly difficult season. But here we are in 2021, gathering to celebrate a moment, to celebrate a person, someone who has turned the world upside down. And even now, I would venture to say that some of the unsettledness that we feel and sense is because of the very person who is at the center of this day. See, the living presence of Jesus continues to unnerve the powers of darkness because of what happened on this moment and in this moment that we are gathered to celebrate. Because listen, the power of the resurrection, the power found in a life being brought back from death, proved that the final enemy of life that we face, think about this, one of life's greatest definers is death itself, right? And the fear of death is normal and natural. It's the final period to the sentence of our lives. The one thing that dictators and oppressive regimes hold over people's heads. The live for this moment only pressure that is applied all around us. You know what that kind of pressure is? The tyranny of self-absorption exists out of a fear that this life is all that there is to live for. But what was supposed to be the end of the life of Jesus actually turned into the beginning of what Jesus was just starting to do. But let's be honest. There is nothing normal about a person coming back to life. And not just being resuscitated back to life, like full on walking through walls, showing off scars, forgiving the deniers, that kind of back to life. And for a lot of us, Easter has become something we think we know so well. We have the story down. For a lot of us, we can recite it in our sleep. It's like we don't think there's anything new to see. There's nothing new to hear. And for a lot of people in our world, actually, that's how they view faith in general. that it's outdated, that it's stuck in an old way of seeing the world. That there's nothing that faith can do in our lives now. That things are just the way they are and there's nothing you can do about it. And that nothing that even Jesus claims to have done is very appealing. And let me say this. For a while now, we know that there's a lot of stuff in our culture, in our world, that claims Christianity, but really has nothing to do with Jesus. But that just helps us to see the beauty of the true faith. See, that is the mystery of this living Jesus that we celebrate on this day. When we think we have it all figured out, Jesus goes and does something beyond the boxes we have made for him. See, we think we have Easter all figured out, right? Everybody knew this weekend was coming up. This is what we do once a year, right? But that first Easter, that first experience for those who had been with Jesus, the ones who had seen him cause the blind to see, the ones who had watched him walk on the water, the ones who had seen him calm the raging storm, the ones who had even seen Jesus go up on this mountaintop and have this experience with these Old Testament heroes, Elijah and Moses, right? They had seen him in this moment, right? The ones who had heard Jesus even say over and over and over again, I'm going to die, but I will come back to life. They must have thought he was just talking figuratively, right? They thought they had seen it all. But this moment, this day, this morning, well, it turns everything upside down. We're going to look at the story in the book of Mark in the New Testament. And I want to encourage you as we look at Mark chapter 16, verses 1 through 8, I want you to listen to how really unprepared they were for what they were about to experience. Mark chapter 16, verses 1 through 8, listen to the words, the version of Jesus' resurrection. It says, Saturday evening, when the Sabbath ended, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome went out and purchased burial spices so they could anoint Jesus' body. Very early on Sunday morning, just at sunrise, they went to the tomb. And on the way, they were asking each other, who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance to the tomb? But as they arrived, they looked up and saw that the stone, which was very large, had already been rolled aside. When they entered the tomb, they saw a young man clothed in a white robe sitting on the right side. The women were shocked. But the angel said, don't be alarmed. You're looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He isn't here. He is risen from the dead. Look, this is where they laid his body. Now go and tell his disciples, including Peter, that Jesus is going ahead of you to Galilee. You will see him there, just as he told you before he died. It says the women fled from the tomb, trembling and bewildered. And they said nothing to anyone because they were too frightened. These women, they had a job to do, right? They were going and they were focused, they were resolved. They were going to care for the body of Jesus. The movement was over. The revolution was dead. Nothing was going to change. And at the least that they could do was go and take care of their dear friend, their leader, their beloved Jesus' body out of respect for him. They were lucky enough to have a friend a person who was part of the movement who had a tomb that they could borrow. See, what usually would happen is that people would be put in these tombs and the decaying process would begin and a smell from the decaying body would be very, very powerful. And so they would go and get these spices and these oils and these perfumes and they would try to take care of the body and make sure that it was not overwhelming the smell, because there would be other bodies that eventually would be put in those tombs. And then they would leave the bodies there for about a year, and then they would come and they would collect the bones of their loved ones to keep, to care for. And so, on their way to do this job that they were very focused on doing so early in the morning, they began to have this conversation. And I can't imagine what all they must have talked about. Maybe they talked about how scared they were. Maybe they talked about how sad they were that they had seen Jesus die and what was going to happen to them. They talked about how they'd seen him see the people take Jesus off the cross and wrap him in linens. But what we do know for sure that they talked about was their concern and their worry about that large stone that was in front of the entrance of the tomb. Who was going to move it for them? It was so large. And what they would do with these large stones is they would roll them right into place where it would almost settle in over the entrance. And it would be very difficult to remove that stone. But almost immediately, things began to change. Maybe they came around the corner and they saw the stone wasn't over the entrance. This isn't what they were expecting to see. Something was off. And so they enter into the tomb. There's no body to put perfume on, to put spices on. Something's not right. And it's interesting, there's a young man who's there who's dressed in white, and I can almost imagine what this scene would be like. Things are not how they thought they were going to be. You ever had those kind of moments where things don't seem like they're turning out quite like you thought they were going to turn out? I was talking to somebody this week about Easter last year. Remember Easter last year? We weren't like this on Easter last year. We made a video for our service, and I remember I had to do like 20 takes to get it ready. And I do remember thinking, this is surely going to be over by summer of last year, July. This is surely going to be over by the fall of last year. Surely Christmas, it'll be over. Well, January, February. It was interesting because we thought we knew so much. Does that ever blow your mind just a little bit? Like all the technology that we have, all the great human advances that we have done and had and made. And yet, we discover how little we still don't know. This is one of those moments where everything begins to change really fast for these women. It's like a brand new reality begins to unfold in real time. There's that young man sitting there. And I can only imagine as they enter in, I would imagine that it would be a little startling to see a live person in the tomb who begins to speak to you. And while it's strange, you also get this peaceful sense of what's taking place. And the man, some versions of the story say that he says, do not be afraid, but the one we've read today says, don't be alarmed. He says, you are looking for Jesus of Nazareth who was crucified. Basically saying, hey, you got the right place. You're at the right tomb. You didn't pick the wrong tomb. This is the one. This is where it happened. This is the same tomb that you saw them bring that body in and lay the body. Right here, this is where it was. So they had seen where they had laid the body. They were in the right tomb. But this guy is saying that Jesus has been brought back to life. I mean, whoa. I don't know about you, but that would be the ultimate freak out moment for me. If you told me that somebody who had been dead was now alive, and I've been to a lot of funerals, I've done a lot of gravesides. I've seen with my own eyes when death takes the breath out of somebody's body. And I have never seen someone come back to life like this. Like the way that this guy is describing about Jesus. Now, we have the ability to look back on this story, and remember I said there's a lot about Easter that we have got all figured out, and we've said it so many times for some of us. But let's get real. This kind of situation would be overwhelming for any real normal person. If you put yourself just for a moment in their shoes, in their place in this moment, right? This new reality begins to unfold in real time for them. And what the young man says to them, to these women, sets the lives of all of Jesus' followers, all of his disciples, on a new course, a new mission that was beginning to be realized. It was time. It was time for everything they had been preparing for, and they didn't even really fully realize it. It was time for it to fall into place. It was time for the world to really know who this Jesus and what Jesus was all about. It was time to go and tell. Go and tell. That's what he told them to go and do. But I found it interesting. He says, go and tell the other disciples, including Peter. See, Peter's one of the 12. And if you know anything about Peter, Peter just a few days before this had denied he had anything to do with Jesus. He pretended like he didn't even know. He lied about his relationship with Jesus. That's how bad it had gotten. But you see, the reason that this matters is because in this new reality that is unfolding in real time, there's a very clear message that is to be sent to Peter. See, this new reality will have God's unconditional love at the center of its very existence. A love that reaches out to a man who denied he even knew Jesus when the pressure came. A love that sends a very clear message to Peter. Listen, Peter, God still wants you. God still cares about you. Your life still matters to the Jesus that you gave your life to, even though you messed up. See, this is a message of resurrection for Peter. Peter's actions, his cowardice, his downright abandoning of Jesus. Peter is given a chance to come back to life. You know, this past year, there's been a lot of mistakes. To be really honest with you, Christians have not been a unified representation of Jesus. We've said some really horrible things about each other, to each other. We've gotten caught up in some stuff that has really damaged the witness of the church. And we're paying for it. We're still struggling with it. We look back on this series that we just did here at Pineville Church, about the 7 deadly sins, and we got caught up. We got caught up in pride and envy and anger. Anger that gripped us. And we let the sun go down on our anger. And oftentimes, it's been because we are so afraid of all the change transpiring around us. And much like Peter, we abandoned Jesus because of our fear of the unknown. But I've got good news. Because just like Peter, Jesus has a message for us.
Amen.
So, here's what the young man told the women. Jesus will go before them, and he will meet them in Galilee, including Peter. Earlier in the book of Mark, chapter 14, these are exactly the words Jesus said before he died. He said, "But after I am raised from the dead, I will go ahead of you to Galilee," and what does he say? "Meet you there." There's something powerful about that phrase. Jesus saying, "I will go ahead of you. I will go wherever you go." You see, Jesus isn't on the cross anymore. Jesus isn't in the grave anymore. Jesus is on the move, and he is going before us. Jesus is giving us a future with him. And everywhere Jesus sends us, every situation we walk into, every difficult moment, every unknown future that we face. And listen, I have some couples that I'm doing the weddings for this summer, and I want to tell you right now, if you're getting married this summer, I want you to be encouraged. Jesus is going before you into that marriage. Every new mom and dad, or expecting mom and dad, Jesus is going ahead of you as you become a parent. Every parent of a teenager or of a college student, Jesus is going before you as you navigate these unusual, unsettling, unnerving waters. Every kid, every student who is experiencing the unknown of doing school virtual, of going to school one day or staying at home, and even for parents who are like, "I don't know if I should send my kids to school." It's frightening. All of that. Jesus is going before you. Amen. And he will meet you there. Amen. Every aging friend of mine who is worried about tomorrow. Maybe you've started to have some concerns about your memory. I've got good news for you today. Because Jesus came back to life, he's going before you into that unknown, into the future. And trust me, it won't be long before you are healed and have the peace of healing and wholeness again. Because the resurrection actually gives us a hope of a future that can change our lives even now. Because this is what Jesus said in the book of John, chapter 11. He says, "I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live even after dying. Everyone who lives in me and believes in me will never die." And I believe it. I believe it 100%. Now it says that the women, they took off from the tomb. It was a lot to encounter and to handle. But we find in the other gospels, when we read the ending of the resurrection story, that they did go and they told the disciples and they told Peter. But something interesting about the book of Mark and this particular story. Here at verse 8, the original manuscript of this book of the Bible, this was where it ended at first. Something had happened to that ending, whether it got lost or torn up, or nobody really knows what happened to the original ending. And so the other pieces that have been added, maybe you have a Bible that has more verses, those that were added a lot later. But I kind of like the fact and the idea that maybe this is where that book ends. And here's why. I heard someone say that it's a great opportunity for us to say, where will the story go next in our lives? What does this mean for us today? How does a future in Jesus change the way we live? This is why in a few moments we'll receive the Lord's Supper, and we receive the Lord's Supper weekly to be reminded that what Jesus did, the death and the resurrection, that the same power that brought Jesus back to life is available to us. The Apostle Paul wrote in Romans 8, 9 through 11, I love this. He says, but you are not controlled by your sinful nature. You are controlled by the Spirit if you have the Spirit of God living in you. He says, and remember that those who do not have the Spirit of Christ living in them do not belong to him at all. And Christ lives within you. So even though your body will die because of sin, the Spirit gives you life because you have been made right with God. The Spirit of God who raised Jesus from the dead lives in you. And just as God raised Christ from the dead, he will give life to your mortal bodies by this same Spirit living within you. See, Jesus coming back to life proves that God can do the same in our lives. Peter being offered the chance to see Jesus alive again proves that there is no mess we can make of our lives that is too much and too far for the reach of God's love and grace. And even if the future seems overwhelming and unknown and everything is changing, hang on and trust that Jesus is going before you. He will meet you in that future. The resurrection actually gives us a hope of a future that can change our lives even now. Would you bow your heads? I want to start off by saying, if you have not trusted Jesus with your life, or maybe you have done it before, but taken it back. Let this Resurrection Sunday be the moment that you give him your life, that you give him everything, all of the struggles, all of your fears, all your anxieties, all of the unknown, all of the anger. Give it all to him today. Let him take it and bring you back to life. Today, start. trust that Jesus will do in your life what he has done for thousands of years and will continue to do. See, the future is bright because Jesus came back to life.